And so right away, a number of leading global media outlets have published similar articles stating that the year 2026, which has just begun, does not bode well for Putin. Nothing good. In particular, the publication Neue Zürcher Zeitung wrote that Moscow is powerless to watch the protests sweeping Iran, as well as the fall of the Maduro regime in Latin America. At the same time, Moscow has done absolutely nothing to help its allies. Russia, writes Neue Zürcher Zeitung, very much wants to become a great power, but everything is turning against it. The upcoming new year of 2026, quite apparently, will bring Vladimir Putin a significant number of new and very bad news. One of the most critical is that his so-called special military operation has already far exceeded its intended duration. Today, by the way, for one day, the USSR war against Nazi Germany ends. 1400, this war has been going on for 19 days already. Russia did not gain prestige or global influence through aggression. Quite the contrary, Putin's empire has shown itself to be weaker than it was 4 years ago, writes Neue Zürcher Zeitung. The overthrow of the Venezuelan dictator Nicolas Maduro also put Moscow's ambitions in serious question. This is yet another humiliation for the Kremlin, which happened before the eyes of the whole world. After all, for many months, Kremlin propaganda was loudly proclaiming that nothing threatened Maduro, since he was under the protection of the fearsome and mighty Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin. But everything happened with exact precision. Yes, quite the opposite. The Russian air defenses didn't fire a shot, and the Americans not only abducted Maduro, but also carried out an operation in Belarus without a single loss. Unprecedented. And how does this look compared to the Hostomel airborne landing? Well, exactly like that. That's how it's presented in the Russian media. They can't even manage to learn the correct names of Ukrainian toponyms. The Hostomel airborne landing, but for 4 years they stubbornly keep calling it the Gastomel landing. Likewise, Putin could only helplessly watch as his most important ally in Latin America was removed from the geopolitical stage. Another slap in the face for Putin was the seizure of Russian tankers. January 7th, the Mariner tanker, let me remind you, was sailing under the Russian flag. Moscow is also helplessly watching the escalating protests in Iran, the article notes. And if Khamenei's regime in Iran falls, it will be yet another blow to Putin. And this time, unfortunately for him, not only would it be an ideological blow, but also a geopolitical catastrophe, since after the fall of Bashar Assad's regime in Syria, Iran remains Putin's main ally in the Middle East. Naturally, none of the other countries with which Putin is actively flirting, namely Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates, can compare to Iran. Today, the media reported that, according to open sources alone, Moscow has purchased more than $4 billion worth of weaponry from Iran. Let me remind you of another reason why every Ukrainian hates Iran and wishes for the fall of this criminal regime. The Shaheds that attack peaceful Ukrainian cities every day. Let me remind you, these are Iranian designs. The Shahed 136 in Gerans, these terrifying machines of death, all of them were developed by Iranian engineers. Hundreds and hundreds of these infernal machines which reap their terrible harvest of death every day. So this is the reason why every Ukrainian hates the Iranian regime and of course wishes for it to drown in its own blood. Moreover, Putin's obsession with capturing Ukraine has resulted in Moscow losing and neglecting other areas of its own interests. However, Putin's greatest defeat has, of course, been the war in Ukraine, which Moscow still cannot win. Another leading global publication, the Wall Street Journal, has also published an almost identical article. The journalist of the publication, Amy Knight, an American historian and writer who has authored a number of books, particularly about the Kremlin and Kremlin sentiments, she wrote that the year started off extremely badly for Putin. She also draws parallels to the fact that the Great Patriotic War lasted less time than the so-called special military operation has already lasted. Moreover, it will take Russian troops more than a year to reach Russia's borders, to fully occupy Donetsk region, to completely seize Donbass. She also cites stories about the capture of the Russian tanker Mariner. On January 7th, she naturally recalls the story with Venezuela and Iran. And she reminds us that the front line in Ukraine has turned into one continuous graveyard for Russian soldiers. Ukrainian military drones are destroying up to 80% of the Russian occupiers' manpower and equipment. At the same time, total military spending in 2025 has risen to a record sum of 15.5 trillion rubles. That's 5 times more than in 2021. Putin is losing a great deal, especially in the eyes of ordinary Russians, who for now remain silent, not yet complaining, but everyone sees what is happening, and when the regime truly weakens, Russia could share the fate of Iran, as we can clearly see. No matter how much the repressive regime of the Ayatollahs has pressured the Iranian people, and this has been going on for nearly 50 years, in the end, the fruits of anger in Georgia have ripened, and the results of these ripened fruits can now be seen firsthand in hundreds of Iranian cities. Moreover, as Putin weakens, he is becoming more and more dependent on the actions of the American administration, no matter how much he tries to deny it. And the oligarchs are becoming increasingly dissatisfied as well. Well, to be honest, I wouldn't overestimate this factor, to put it mildly. They can be as dissatisfied as they want, but it's probably impossible to find more cowardly creatures than Russian oligarchs. So I certainly wouldn't bet seriously on that.